Welcome to episode 8 of the AVA Movement Podcast, a show about all things Angels Airwaves, To the Stars, and Tom DeLonge. My name is Adam Barnard, and I'm once again joined by Joe Thueson, who has been on past episodes of the AVA Movement Podcast and also heads up the To the Stars fan page on Facebook. Joe, thanks for sitting down with me today to talk about the new season of Unidentified.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam. It's great to be back. I'm excited to talk about Unidentified Season 2. It was definitely a packed season of new information. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure. And I think, what's been great about Unidentified, at least, coming out over the summer, is the fact that we have something Tom DeLonge related to discuss, past
right.
the All That's Left Is Love single. Right now with the coronavirus again, just to give a little update, Tom had said over the summer he was looking to put out like the fourth single and music video sometime in September or October. Right now we're at the beginning of October, headed into October. So not sure if that's still the plan, but it seems, looking at a logical release calendar, it seems like a single coming out before the end of the year, maybe not October, but more like November and December would make sense. And then the album could, like Thomas said, come out sometime at the beginning of 2021, maybe first quarter, possibly second quarter. I guess kind of, if they want the album to launch straight into a tour, there needs to be a globally distributed vaccine, and that might not happen until next summer. So still, what we're talking about right here is all the information we have, which I guess isn't that new, but I feel like it bears reiterating.
Right. Yeah, that's basically what I've seen too. I think they're kind of waiting to see what's next and when they can get back out on tour to actually tour the new album. And then I did see in some interview that he did mention still creating he's still directing a film. So that was always the original intent, as far as I knew, was to have kind of the album to get paired with this film. So who knows if they're kind of still waiting on that. And then with this documentary too that I know I'm excited for.
A Peter McKinnon one?
Yeah. He's they got to be waiting for kind of the album release to really tie in that documentary, I imagine. So that's probably why they're waiting. Like you said, they don't know what to expect right now. So I think to really kind of tie in the whole vision of an album, possibly a film, documentary, and then kick off another tour, they have to be able to tour, right? So yeah, I agree. That's probably what they're waiting for.
And I'm really glad you brought up the feature-length film that Tom's doing, because we've seen the band integrate, a film project and an album and a tour and some other media project or properties, but I think Love is the biggest example with a double album and a feature film. And then, the Dreamwalker kind of had the Poet Anderson short and some comics and an EP come after the year after the Dreamwalker came out. But I feel like so far, this new release has been billed as the ultimate Angels and Airwaves release. It's a full, a well-budgeted proper movie directed by Tom, the quote album of his career. It took 3 or 4 years to write.
Yeah.
Coming out of a long break that he took to do To the Stars Academy and other things. And the movie is really interesting because that was supposed to get shot before the 2019 tour. So that was supposed to get done in the summer before they did the comeback tour. And then it turned into, okay, we're going to do it after he comes back from the tour, at the end of the year in 2019. And then it turned into, oh shit, we want this album to be done by next summer. I don't know if it was a label thing or just a self-imposed deadline. So then I think Tom completely shifted in the first half of this year to, just getting in the studio and hammering out the record. And then it became, well, now there's a global pandemic, so we can take our time. We're not rushing back out to tour and get everything out. So, I mean, I don't know where the album is at now. They've tracked drums and bass months ago, so technically they could be done by now. But Tom has been posting on Instagram that they're location scouting again and trying to prep the feature film. I don't know if they're going to, again, wait until there's a vaccine, or they're going to try to just do what they can, like a lot of productions are doing, to keep everybody safe but still move forward. But again, I don't know. It begs the question, is like a lot of loose ends to tie up. So are we looking at first quarter, or is it going to turn into third or fourth quarter of 2021.
Right.
Again, like I've stated this before, I don't really have a problem with that. As long as it's whole and it comes out, the way it was intended to come out. I would rather this continue to drag on and then feel like an atom bomb when it comes out and have a lot of good press and be something that hasn't been done a lot in modern rock and roll in terms of the scope and ambition. But I will say I rightfully understand, or I understand fans' frustration with, okay, yeah, it'll be done 2019, 2020, early 2021. I guess my whole thing is like, guys, we've been down this road before. Like, this is extremely, extremely common. Every major release Tom puts out, he pencils in a date on the calendar and it changes 5 times.
Right.
Usually like a year or two later than he says. So it'll be over when it's over. I guess that's the update and the recap I think we should telegraph.
Yeah. If any time, maybe it wasn't his fault. It's this time, right? Because, I mean, there's no way they could have seen all this coming. And I think this is how they've always envisioned producing and releasing music is a multimedia kind of conglomerate. So I think they're holding on to that vision. And I agree. I say do it right and do it as it was planned. Don't piecemeal it out, and I'll be happy to wait for it.
Yeah. Cool. So let's go ahead and dive into the Unidentified Season 2 discussion. Watch me as I break the television. Talk me off the ledge. I can't envision. Take me to the altar fruition. I am on my way, unstoppable. Lock the doors and warn the Federation. Right and bold, here comes the revolution. My oh my, the king is on a mission. I am on my way, unstoppable. Pure in heart, a king infallible. Great big fucking time, so powerful. So after Unidentified had its debut season in 2019, I think a lot of us, myself included, were very eager to see how the work of the To the Stars Academy was going to progress. The Academy and his whole board of advisors that he's put together, his ex-government people, that was all rolled out in 2017, but there were a lot of question marks, I think, in terms of what that was going to look like. And obviously there was a lot of credibility behind the Academy and the rollout they did, but there was also kind of it was very ambitious and vague, and people were kind of wondering like, okay, well, how do you go about this? We've gotten the pitch, but what does this look like? And I think the first season of Unidentified did such a great job of, I mean, obviously it centers around Lou Elizondo, but the whole team checks in with Lou all the time as he reports on what he's been investigating and where he's been traveling to and what he's been learning. And part of what blew me away about the first season and just the show in general is how authentically and grounded it showed the work that was being done and didn't feel too hyped up for TV production. And it's like you could kind of see how Lou operated and what his mission was. But then, the question is like, oh my God, like, if he's traveling around the world every year to try to learn, as much as he can and follow all these rabbit holes, it's only a matter of time until he's going to find something. So, I was waiting with really bated breath being like, how far is the second season going to go? How much are they going to reveal? So I just want to throw it over to you. What are your first impressions of the second season and what stuck out to you? And did it live up to the expectation?
Yeah, I agree. I was curious to see what they would get into. They had their 3 videos, now infamous videos, that were shared. And
3 years old now. It's like 3 years ago.
Right. And that was kind of the basis of season 1. And I think a lot of people thought, well, what else do you have, right? Like that was kind of felt like that was maybe everything in their pockets. And but you knew for a second season to occur, they couldn't just keep pounding on those videos. If they did, that would have probably lost a lot of followers and a lot of people that want to see what they're going to do next if they just kind of reiterated those videos again. So I was a little worried about that, to be honest. Yeah. It's like, man, are they going to dissect these again? So I was actually very happy to see that it's new information. It's new new interviews. It's still Lou and mostly Chris Mellon. I don't know if you caught the quote in there, but Lou Elizondo was the Kirk and Mellon was the Spock.
Oh yeah,
that was kind of funny, but that's really kind of how it is. And Lou's still driving this thing, but he has Chris Mellon there, and what better expert than he and Steve Justice to kind of bring his stuff back to and get their thoughts on it. When I view this season as a whole, there's context within each episode, but I think there's a bigger picture that To the Stars Academy is trying to paint, and it's pretty obvious that they're trying to drive home specifics. So there's a lot of details and the individuals, and it's fun to watch, but they're trying to prove the points that this is scientific data. We're not going to go base this off of emotion or kind of rogue thoughts and opinions. They have a scientific, almost algorithm to how they're studying these things.
Sure, yeah.
And the other thing they're driving home is that it's all credible witnesses. These are all, for the most part, military, and not just any military personnel. Some of these guys, I think in episode 1, he's flown over 100 missions. These are seasoned pilots that are kind of seeing this stuff and describing these things. Trained. They keep saying that these are trained individuals.
Trained observers, yeah.
Trained observers. The other piece that they're driving home is that it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just a U.S. based. In some of the episodes we see them go to South America. I think in season 1, they were in Italy, I believe. So that's intentional. I'm sure it is, to kind of build this global kind of focus. It's not just the U.S. And I think the last thing that they're trying to paint is, and this one's a little touchy depending on who you talk to, but that we can't deny that it's somewhat of a threat. It may not be, but until you know more, you're short-sighting yourself to not consider it at least a threat until you know more. So I think those are kind of the main points that they try to drive across, kind of mixed in with these very detailed interviews and witnesses.
For sure, yeah. And I think, you raise a great point about it being global, because one of the interesting parts of season 1 was, for me at least, was learning about how there is an awareness in the halls of Congress and the defense community, a vague awareness of the ubiquity and wide-ranging amount of credible reports of unidentified flying objects showing interest in our military nuclear facilities, just even flying in near the general public. And there is kind of a stigma or a fear that this getting out would cause political damage or damage people's faiths or concern and alarm people and make us feel helpless. And so as a result, it's not studied or researched or disclosed upon. As long as a flying saucer doesn't land in Times Square and little green men walk out, it's like we're at the point where we're like, oh, it is. It's just, you're seeing something. It's a weather balloon or whatever. And so there's been this kind of like almost anti-science, in my opinion, approach to keeping this squelched down and in a way that doesn't threaten our society and our faith in our institutions. However, the good thing is that not all countries are like us in that respect. Like in Italy and Peru, there are parts of government, or there are people in the government who take this very, very seriously and study this and research it and are willing to collaborate with members from other countries as long as it's all in the name of research. And, we saw that in Italy and we saw that in Peru. And I'm sure if there are future seasons, we're going to go other places and find, more credible reports, but also more perspectives on what the UAP phenomenon as a whole represents and what's behind it. Because again, the central question seems to be like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's so widespread. It's not just, okay, it's everyone sees triangles. It's all different kinds of craft. I mean, some of it obviously, even in the show, has been somewhat disproven, or they've said it could be military flares, it could be a weather balloon, it could be whatever. And sometimes doubt is raised, which is nice, because then it's not like we're making everything bigger than it is. There's an academic approach saying, okay, some of this is going to be explainable, but there's so much that isn't, and what isn't is so diversified that you're kind of left to ask, is it just one thing? Is it a variety of things? Is it extraterrestrial? Is it interdimensional? Is it us from the future? I mean, there's so many questions, and I think, that's gonna be the hardest question to answer, but that's also a process. Like, one of my favorite quotes from this season is Lou says, "I don't think disclosure is an event, it's a process." Yeah. And I thought that was a great way of putting things, because I think we so want that 2 or 3 page press release that says, here's what it is, here's the proof. Yep. If it's extraterrestrials, here's their statement, here's the picture, here's the 3-minute news video. This is what you've been seeing for the past, century or two that we have it reported. And that's just not going to happen. But what's great about this season particularly is it does feel like an advancement from season 1. It does feel like a natural evolution. And in my opinion, some of the stuff that was discussed and recorded was felt like it was more illuminating and starting to draw more parallels and start to answer those questions. Season 1 was maybe opening the question, and now season 2 is starting to write the answer to that big question.
Yeah, no, I agree. When you go back to your comment about it's just not a single event, like, I don't know if you were surprised, but when all that stuff in the New York Times came out about the Navy and I think the Air Force is the only one that hasn't really just straight up said yes, but I think it was the Navy and the Pentagon said yes, we don't know what these are. These are unidentified UAP, Surprisingly, didn't get that much of a reaction from the general public. Like, I think because it didn't get as much as it should have, to be honest. Like, that's huge, and people, I think, are so 2020'd out that it's like, yeah, okay, not a surprise, right? So I think the timing of it is at a time where people are ready to accept things for the most part, and if the more you talk to people, it's like, yeah, there's a good chance, because it's just, we know that the universe is infinite. It actually kind of made me laugh how much it kind of went up and then went away. Like, people were like, oh yeah, okay. But I don't know if that hurts or helps them. But
are you talking about even when it first came out, the videos came out in 2017, and it was hypothetically would be the biggest story, and there's so much going on in the world. I think there's a massive global political shift that's happening just in the last 5 or so years, and everyone's so absorbed by that. It's like, oh shit, man, we don't have time for this. We don't have the mental bandwidth and energy to process what the revelations of this are, unless somebody lays it out in front of us. And honestly, I'm not going to get partisan here, but just talking about politically, there are plenty of political facts out there that are corroborated and that most people don't know, and you would think most people would know and accept and factor into their decision process. But if the waters are just murky enough, if there's not a direct answer and a 90+% clarity and unanimity in terms of what we all believe, it's we tend to ignore it. Just like it takes years for people to accept political realities of things that actually happen, but we have to learn about and contextualize, it is taking years for people to accept the realities of something that we don't know, but is definitely here. It's been, quantified by hundreds, if not thousands, of trained observers in military technology and radar. And yes, we really cannot lay it out for you. It's very much opaque. And so I think for some people, as a coping mechanism, which we've all developed, is wake me up when there's a definite. Wake me up when we when we're ready, when you're ready to tell us squarely what this is. And you know what? I respect that decision, if people make that decision for themselves. I certainly understand it. Time is scarce. Energy is a scarce resource these days. It's like we have to preserve our own sanity. But for me, I have just found this so interesting because for so long in past years growing up, I wanted to be a UFO enthusiast, but I had so much skepticism. I was not able to justify that. Yeah, that this could be real, or this isn't some kind of a hoax. And that was maybe my own ignorance. But it's like this is exciting because of Unidentified specifically. It's a very academic, calm, mature approach by some very, very, very experienced, credible people in government to look into this in a way that I think makes us all proud. As I guess To the Stars fans and Americans, for those of us who are Americans in the audience.
Yeah, and I think so many times we heard Tom discuss. Oh, I'm talking to these kind of high level people that know these things, and we're like, I mean, even I admittedly was like, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. And like these are those guys, and you can't deny their experience. You can't deny what they've done in their past, and like even Lou's background was questioned at some point.
Yep.
If there really wasn't a tip, what level was he at? And, all this stuff's going to be questioned. But each episode, it just has you more, believing what is actually going on. So if he wasn't lying about that, then, what else isn't he lying about? And I think the reason I love watching Unidentified too, and this isn't a pitch, I'm not paid to say any of this,
sure.
But is because it is so technically laid out and it's thought based, and Lou has a great way of in his interviews bringing up a question as a counterpoint. He plays devil's advocate.
Yeah,
he knows the answer. He already knows the answer. But so many shows just steer away from that, and they say, oh, we're just going to pound on what we think it is. And I don't know how many times throughout the season they say, we don't know what this is. We don't know if it's from here. We're fairly certain it's not ours. It's like kind of as strong as they'll stand on things. But they don't rule out the fact that it could be another country, even though that's fairly unlikely. But they're smart to not say, nope, no chance, right? Because then people think, well, maybe, you don't know that. So I think it's very intentionally laid out with his interviewing and even what they keep and what they take out, because you got to imagine in those interviews half of it's cut, right? So
well, yeah, the other thing about the show that I noticed that is potentially holding it back a little bit is it has to fit a 42-minute format with 4 or 5 ad breaks. And it's like they always seem to, sometimes they'll get into an interview and they'll clearly like cut to a soundbite a minute later. That's like the quick summation of the answer. We don't get the full answer. So it's like the one thing at this point that's holding it back is like, I think that regulation is kind of quelching the academic curiosity of the show. And so it's like almost like the raw footage is probably going to be fascinating, but nobody's going to watch the raw footage, and it's not like a Netflix show or like a streaming series that you can really, either have some episodes will be 40 minutes, some episodes will be an hour 15. I know some shows or documentaries that are like that, and that's very helpful. This always has to be 42 minutes. So I just wanted to, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's one thing I noticed that's kind of like one of my few qualms with the show at this point.
Yeah, it's tough to get like super invested when they kind of break it up. And
yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a show on the History Channel, which is entertainment, but this is their medium that they can use to get this out. So of course they're going to take that. I mean, obviously I wish it was on regular TV, your standard TV channels, even if it was at a different time or day. I think a lot of people would watch it, but I mean, it did decent numbers though. I don't know if you ever checked that out, but
I think so. Yeah.
They're typically just under 1 million, I think, per episode. So I mean, that's pretty good for their time slot. A lot of people are watching, and I think they're starting to now know To the Stars Academy, and they kind of have a vibe to them now. Whereas you mentioned it earlier that people were kind of curious what are they even trying to do.
Sure.
And one other thing that really stood out to me was in one of the later episodes, I think it was episode 7, but they went through the vault. I don't know if you remember that, but they were like analyzing videos.
Yeah, the analysis software. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a very new wave, kind of almost like a prototype of a technology that can analyze a video, an amateur video, quickly.
Yeah.
And raise any immediate red flags as to whether it feels faked, or kind of say, there's a 30% chance this video is real based on the red flags this catches, or no, this is like 90 to 95%, never certain, but like it gives you a good estimate of whether a video has been doctored or not, which is very, very, very helpful because that can be hard to analyze with the naked eye.
Right. And I think something, I wish that got a little more talked about in the season. I think that's huge. I mean, as far as I know, I don't know if there's anything else like that. But again, it's taking emotion out of it. It's taking, any sort of theory, personal opinion out of it. It's putting stuff through a scientific algorithm to prove its authenticity. And, I think that's one of those things where if you were to ask yourself, whatever, 5 years ago, what is this academy about? Like, seeing something like the Vault is a direct product of this company, and it's something that they could potentially use to kind of change how we analyze these videos, and that's a huge step in progress for the entire planet when we analyze these things.
For sure. And, there was a lot of interesting technology in this season, or at least a few instances of it. Like, my favorite part was the when they visited these like young kids who were coming up with this new like drone software where you integrate all these drones together. I can't really remember the name of it, but it's like literally you are able to control 100+ drones and they fly in a pattern, and it could be used for military application. But where we saw it was they were testing it in a field in some suburb or whatever, semi-populated area of the United States, and it was like when I saw those, they used footage of that test earlier in like past episodes or in title sequences before it was contextualized here. And I honestly thought it was fake because it looked so beautiful and so stunning and so elegant, like a light show. I was blown away to see that the show got cameras on the ground and was able to photograph a test of a new emerging technology that's like either not on the market or just barely hit the market or is only open to like private investors or whatever. And man, I was like, I felt like I was tripping for that because it was like, I don't know, another great thing about the show is because Unidentified is chasing objects that are so beyond our own technological reach. Inevitably, in their search, they will come across the most sophisticated human technology that tracks this. So part of what really tickled me about this show as like a bit of a tech geek is just the amount of cool gear that was explained by the military personnel, radar, nuclear, fighter jet technology, or stuff like the drones.
Yeah, and I think they showed that with the intent too of saying, here's your baseline, right? Here's what you might see from whether it's a corporation or an individual, but here's kind of the highest technology drone kind of show you might see out there. Yeah. And it's kind of comparing that to what the witnesses are seeing in the whole like 5 observables. And as cool as those drones are, they can't disappear and shoot away in like faster than light speed, Right. So it's kind of, I think that was like, let us show you kind of how you would baseline something that might be your neighbor, right? And even that, like, your neighbor would never have what they had, but you know what I mean? Like the average person may have something like this. So if you're seeing something, more dynamic than that, then you can kind of rule out that you've seen the highest technology that we have as far as like commercial drones.
For sure, yeah. And it's again interesting that some of the things that Lou investigates, Lou Elizondo, goes and visits places and interviews people, sometimes there is like significant doubt that the show puts on those testimonies, not to insult the people, but just to say like, there was one guy at the North Carolina beach, and it was like, okay, that could have been a military flare. Like, it wasn't really displaying observables. It was weird enough that it could be a UAP, but there's also a military base nearby, and, the video or the eyewitness account looks a lot like a flare. And then there's some instances where, it could be a drone, but then the drone flies at a speed or, almost instantaneous acceleration, which is one of the observables. Okay, that's where it breaks the plausibility that this is just a drone or some kind of enemy technology or whatever. Again, something that was really great, or I don't want to say great, but kind of surprised me about this season was how it was willing to, again, like I said, potentially discount some of the reports, or when Lou consults an expert like the psychologist in the final episodes about some of these people who had either close contact with a potentially alien being or were abducted or were moved, like some military guys passed out in a truck when they came upon a UAP, and then they showed up 7 miles elsewhere. Stuff that is not explained, or stuff that is a little bit more crazy and scary than even some of the stuff this show has covered in the past. The psychologist will say this could be some form of trauma-induced self-manifested memory. And it's interesting in the final episodes, both cases where they interviewed people, they didn't get in contact with the other person. So it was like there was no corroboration. It's like we only, there were 2 guys in the military truck and 2 guys in the house in Montana, and we never got to talk to the second guy.
Yeah.
So it's like that raises a bit of doubt, and then, some expert testimony from the psychologist raises a bit of doubt. And I personally, credit where credit's due. It's like usually on a show like this, you want to have a blowout season finale. You want to save, the alien craft that you've discovered to reveal in the final season. And it was like the season finale for this season is like, yeah, some of this is bullshit. It was just straight up honest. And Lou has said, we don't write the show. It's like each season of Unidentified is just where I happen to be traveling, where I happen to be researching and what data I happen to be collecting. We bring along a camera team, and then, they do recreations and edit it down later. But they just, the emphasis, the roots of the show is just capturing that raw data. And that's why, again, I was afraid this season was going to try to go too big or be like, guys, look, rush stuff before it was ready. And it didn't. So props for that.
Yeah. And I'm sure they look at how they're being viewed. I read a lot about, is this government ran disclosure kind of so that they can control the narrative, and this is kind of being all ran through someone, right? But I also noticed that I was interested to see that I think it was episode 6. It's all about UFO cover-ups,
right? Which
kind of negates that whole point that maybe they're working for the government. They dedicated almost an entire episode on how, even something I didn't know was that the footage from the Nimitz, those Hawkeyes or whatever, that were kind of recording the entire thing from like a bird's eye view, was never seen. That got taken away by the Air Force on a Navy boat, right, or a Navy ship.
It was right before they were going to log the footage that was requested, and absconded with. Yeah.
Who knows what that shows, right? Like, that's huge. And but I think it goes back to like they're doing some counterpoints here in this season to say, we're gonna give all the views. We're not gonna hide what we don't know, and we're not gonna say it's something if we don't know. And also, we're gonna take some perspectives here of potentially that the government's trying to cover this up. And you could say, well, they're doing that because they don't want you to think they're government. But I mean, at what point do you stop with that rabbit hole? But I found that was pretty interesting, that they were clear to kind of focus on the government's covering this up. They're not gonna just kind of skate past that whole thing that's been keeping this from everyone for centuries or decades rather. But I thought that was good that they tackled that aspect.
Yeah, and you know, it's good to have some reasonable doubt as a viewer, because the show is very compelling. You know, my research and my take on it has led me to believe that no, this is, you know, legit, but it is kind of crazy when you think about it. And it's like people who like Hal Puthoff, who is just has an insane resume, and Steve Justice, Chris Mellon, Jim Semivan, Lou Elizondo. I mean, it's like these guys are like partnering with like the rock star that we love and who does like has like all these crazy weird sci-fi projects. Like, what kind of bizarre reality is this? And there is some reasonable doubt that is raised. Where I'm at is that if this is in fact done with the intent to mislead, or it is disingenuous in nature, this is like a 5-star Oscar-winning bullshit campaign. Yeah, because it's like there is so much legitimacy and balance and corroboration from the press, and from the Pentagon itself. Right. You know, military has spoken up on a few matters, and you know, at one point they said he's not, ATIP didn't exist, Lou didn't work here, and it's like, okay, it did exist, and it kind of walked that statement back. Yeah, right. You know, it's like I've talked to other people who have taken notice of the show, who aren't maybe Angels Airwaves fans, who are part of, you know, defense or intelligence guys, people who are fans or interested in the military. And, you know, they obviously track this because this is a big story in the military community now, given all the eyewitnesses that are coming forward publicly on the record. And they've said like, no, I think this is it. Like, this is the real thing. But yeah, there is always that lingering doubt. And, you know, I encourage people, if something feels wrong, you know, ask a question, like research it. You know, it's like this should not be a show, or, you know, the To the Stars community around the show should not be one of absolutes where it's like, oh, you're just a hater or whatever. It's like healthy questioning should be a part of this process, because that's the only way it's transparent and productive, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the other point I hear sometimes is that it's like a financial thing, that they're trying to, you know, it's a money grab for, I hate that term, but it gets thrown out a lot. But like, honestly, look at Tom. He's very successful. He's sold 50 million records. He does not need a couple $1,000 from investors. And look at Chris Mellon. I mean, he comes from a super successful family. I think his grandpa was like a oil tycoon, and like he's worked with like the Rockefellers, and I mean, he does not need money. I guarantee you that. Like, this is their passion, and this is what they want to do with their lives now that they're kind of out of their careers. Yeah. And I guarantee you, they feel that, you know, they have something to share, and they have the means to kind of get something out and maybe be part of something special. And I truly think that's all it is. And I'm a very skeptical person. I'm not someone that's just gonna jump in and believe anything. And I just truly think that they're doing it for the good of everyone. And they, you know, obviously Tom thinks it's cool, and this is what he's always wanted to do, and that's fine.
He brings the enthusiasm, right?
Yeah. But I don't think there's any ill intent. You know, I mean, I know people may think otherwise, but it just, when I line it up, it just doesn't make sense to me that they're either doing it for money, or they're working for the government to cover this up, or you know, there's been other ways that the government has been able to cover it up.
Sure.
Which I was going to ask you, did you see that about the National Enquirer, and like did you catch that, where the guy who took over for the National Enquirer right before they started doing all this like crazy UFO stories was like an ex-psychological warfare officer?
Yeah, that was,
I was like, what?
That was the moment. That was like the moment, or one of the few moments that like sent shivers down my spine. It's like, you know, in what world does someone quit, you know, psychops in a intelligence unit and be like, yeah, I'm going to go to a gossip, you know, go create a gossip rag mag. Yeah. It's like, is that really a logical lateral move? And no, I mean, it's
they wanted to make it, you feel crazy for seeing something, basically.
Yes.
Was their intent. But yeah, that just, again, like this season, there's a lot of little stuff. It wasn't like the, you know, big fireworks, here's some videos, but there's a lot of great information in this season where I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like this, why aren't people talking about this, you know?
Did you have any favorite parts of the season or stuff you wanted to talk about in terms of like individual accounts or the kinds of people they talk to? Because again, one of the things that shocked me about this season was like how diversified the eyewitnesses were. Because first season was a lot about the Nimitz incident, military, UAPs circling nuclear or military bases, shipping, Navy deployments or stuff like that. And that is continued in this season, but it's alongside like 5 or 6 other parallel lanes. And I was really just shocked at the scope of the season, and very grateful they were able to wrap like literally just before the coronavirus hit. So we got, it didn't feel like it was cut short in any way.
Yeah, I mean, outside of my favorite shot in the season of Chris Mellon talking with a Descendants poster behind him, other than that, which you will not find anywhere but Unidentified. I chuckled when I saw that, but I think my favorite episode was honestly when they talked about the triangles.
Okay.
And the different accounts were so similar, even down to the noise they were making and their kind of mannerisms, this kind of slow tracking, almost like they were mapping out a grid of some sort. And even how like just the use of triangulation is the best way to do that, collect data with like that pinpoint accuracy. And I think he spoke to someone who had like 17,000 case files in his house.
Wow, yeah,
I mean,
that.
that's crazy, and they're all very similar accounts. Like I said, even down to that kind of low humming sound, and I just can't think of what else that could be. And not only does it do that, but then it can just, disappear in a blink of an eye. It could be out of there. So it's not like a kind of lumbering drone or like a blimp or something. It can boogie out pretty quick. So that's where it's like, what it kind of clicked a light, and I'm fairly new to all this compared to a lot of people out there.
Yeah, me too.
But it kind of flipped a switch. Yeah, it's flipped a switch for me just to say, yeah, they're not all going to be the same craft, and they're probably not even all doing the same thing. They may have different jobs. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
I didn't really think about that before. I was like, oh yeah.
The triangle you're mentioning, the one unique thing the craft was doing is it was like flying low and very slow and was not hiding, but it was like mapping the terrain. It was like something that you would expect like geologists to do from a drone, except it's with this massive craft that doesn't have clear propulsion or a way of sustaining lift. It's very low, doesn't emit a lot of noise. That's really freaking weird. It's like, it's also very bold, assuming there's someone or something controlling the craft. It's very bold of it. It's not hiding or running away like other instances of UAPs have shown. It's like, this is something that's like flying 500 feet above a small town, and it's something that we have phone calls recorded from the sheriff's department and multiple eyewitnesses, both law enforcement and civilians across several parts of town on the same night describing the same thing. Like that's where it gets very hard to coordinate if you're doing a bullshit campaign. And it's like that, basically I just love when the show's able to assemble all this primary evidence, because then it's like I really have faith that it's like, oh no, this is a very, very, very feasible and legitimate instance of a UAP. And then it's like that's where the real work gets done, because you're caching all that data, and then you have a largely accurate representation of the story that you can then log to the Stars vault or whatever, and maybe something like that will pop up in the future, a similar account, and then that's where you start connecting the dots.
Yeah, and then they kind of do a good job of hitting you with Steve Justice to say, yeah, we don't have this, and no, they're not going to test it. You know what I mean?
They're not going to test on civilians. Yeah,
he knows, and they want to. There's a whole episode with could they be testing it? Could the Air Force be testing stuff on the Navy?
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
And he
that
said,
too.
I guess maybe, but that just wouldn't happen. Like someone would have to know about it. They wouldn't that stuff's too expensive and, too high tech and too secretive to just be floating around on some cruiser out in the Atlantic. Like it just wouldn't work that way. So
be very psychologically scarring, and also the Navy has access to weapons and aircraft. If they get panicked and they perceive it as a threat, that could create an incident.
Right.
That could create that could create an incident that becomes a real problem in a lot of ways. So I don't see that being a feasible stress test. Using unwittingly using an aircraft carrier. And Steve Justice is a great addition to the team because he was a developer of like the most advanced craft at Lockheed Martin for a long time, and Lockheed Martin has built some of the most advanced U.S. aircraft during the Cold War, and possibly something since then. I guess we don't know. Obviously he's bound by very strict NDAs, but he can provide an expert's analysis into just the general landscape of advanced craft. Military or otherwise, and he lends tremendous credibility to the investigation as well by being able to analyze what is cutting edge and what is just in a binary sense completely inaccessible to us, certainly at this point in time.
Yeah, he kind of tends to give the blink once if yes answers, because he basically just sticks to the correct, we do not have this. And it's like, but he knows more than that. I guarantee he knows more than that, but he probably can't say much. I mean, he ran Skunk Works, but it's like he, even that though, like, okay, I believe that. Like, if he's saying we don't have it, he would know.
He's the guy, he is the one guy who I feel like every time he's on camera, I'm like, that guy knows so much. Like, it's like you can see it behind his eyes. It's like, all right, that's the guy who has all the secrets of like the 4 or 5 on the team. Yeah. But just to kind of focus on the team dynamic, I love Chris Mellon's Spock element, like you were saying earlier, because like Lou is the Kirk and Lou is the enthusiast, and Lou is like, you can see the passion in the work. You can't really fake it. It's like it's genuine. But Steve Justice and Chris Mellon are the guys who are like, or Chris Mellon in particular, who appears more as the guy who's like, we need data. We need to not jump to conclusions. We need to have a extreme amount of skepticism. Chris Mellon has quoted that Carl Sagan, quote, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And, that seems to be his motto, but then he goes a bit further and says, well, now we have the proof. Now we have enough eyewitness accounts or research to back this up. I just think I'm really starting to like the team dynamic. It's the one part of the show maybe that feels a little staged where they have to do the briefing, but it's like, I love that that's a great chance for people to check in and ask questions that maybe Lou won't even ask, and then Lou has to answer for that. And that keeps everything kind of honest.
Yeah, I get the feeling Lou comes back very excited.
Yeah.
And then he kind of gives his, lays it all out and then kind of closes his eyes waiting for the pushback. But that's good. That's what you want as a team. You can't just have, that's what they're there for, I think, is to play a little bit of devil's advocate and understand the science behind things. And they have all those years of experience and knowledge to say, probably not. Right. Or that's definitely worth looking into. And again, I guarantee you they kind of also greenlight what they show, what they don't show. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of interviews out there that don't make the cut because they're like, that's too shady or it's not strong enough, so let's not put it in. I'm sure there's cuts that are made, and I'm guessing they pull in those guys to kind of get their thoughts on things.
It's the checks and balances, right? That's what works about the team. So are there any other moments in the season that you really liked or wanted to highlight before we wrap up?
I mean, I think we pretty much covered most of it. I know I was trying to think while I was watching it, kind of towards the end of the last episode, is what I felt like maybe was missed. And something I would have liked to see, and perhaps that's going to be in season 3, is the whole Adam projects with the materials that they've received.
Right. Exotic materials,
yeah,
is that what they call it?
Yeah, I think so. I know they're kind of in a they have a contract with the Army to analyze this, and I just think that speaks volumes. This isn't just some rock that someone found that looks funny. I mean, if the Army is going to spend money to analyze this thing, there has to be something to it with whatever they have. So I'm hoping next season that they dive into that and we hear a little more from Hal. And I know he's kind of running that side of things with some of the materials that they get, and I think people are sending them materials to be analyzed, and they either say, yeah, this isn't anything, or wait a second, this has elements that we're not aware of, so let's look further. I was kind of hoping that would show up sometime this season, but I guess it leaves more to look forward to, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I will say this, the whole, exotic materials, fragments of a crashed craft or something like that, that's to me where it gets into very dangerous territory, because if you get that wrong, you lose so much legitimacy. Legitimacy that this show and this initiative, the To the Stars Academy, has rightfully gained so far. So, I mean, it probably was a good thing, if they weren't ready to integrate it into the show, then they probably made the right decision. But, so far the team has been batting a good average. So I guess I'll keep the faith.
Right. Yeah, they're definitely not going to jump to anything without vetting it through. And I think that's probably why they didn't mention it, is because it is still being analyzed by the Army. So I think their contract, though, still states that they still own it. It's not like the Army now owns it, so they can probably do what they want. But just to kind of keep that relationship and not burn those bridges, I'm sure they're waiting to see, what the Army finds before they go plaster it on the History Channel.
Yeah.
for the world to see what we may have as our next tank or something,
For sure, yeah.
There's probably very good reasons.
That's where you get the sci-fi element of things, right?
Yeah, right. And kind of still on topic, but another thing I would love to see, I don't know if you noticed, but Tom is credited for some of the original music in the season. So
yeah.
I'm just saying, I wouldn't mind like an EP or some kind of score that's released from Unidentified, whether it's season 1 or 2. I think that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page, because like as much as I love Tom's very anthemic driving rock music, his, atmospheric experimental vibe music is also really cool. Like just in terms of the stuff we've seen with like the Love interludes, or some of the stuff of Nightmares, and the stuff that he's done with Elan, with Aaron behind the console as well, producing and engineering. I don't know how much music is done for this show, but I think his sensibilities are such a good fit. This is absolutely his passion. He'll know how to evoke the kinds of feelings that you need watching the show, and using the right textures. Maybe we'll get something like kind of like a score evolved EP, where it's like they build up that music into some bigger elements, or tie some tracks together. It would also help boost the profile of the show, because his music has such visibility. So, yeah, if anybody's listening, like an Unidentified score EP would be dope.
Maybe Alon can reach out to Trent Reznor and, just get all three together.
That would be cool. For sure. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the AVA Movement, and for trying something a little bit different and going beyond the band and talking about Unidentified and the work with To the Stars Academy. We hope you enjoy the show, and if you want to hear more podcast episodes or AVA Movement interviews, you can check us out at the AVA Movement on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And we're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, once again, as the AVA Movement. In the meantime, my name is Adam Barnard.
I'm Joe Thueson.
And we'll see you next time.